Welcome, folks, to the very first edition of the 1901 podcast. I'm Kenn Rashad. We are making a historic first move, right? In which I decided to go ahead and make this official first episode to introduce you all to an individual who will be key in contributing to the 1901 podcast, especially during the duration of the current football season. And he is none other than my special guest. And we're going to bring him on real quick. He is none other than Mr. Thomas Griffin, former Grambling football player and a proud GSU graduate. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of previewing the game today, Thomas, for those who may not be aware of who you are, take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of give us an idea where you've been up to this point.
Okay, well, of course, I played from 87 to 91 at Grambling State University under the legendary Eddie Robinson. Also, after I'm a mass comm undergraduate, which I took classes with Kenn, as well as I received my master's degree in sports administration, leisure studies. I bounced around to three different professional football teams. I started out with the New Orleans Saints. Then I was with the BC Lions, and which is a Canadian football league. And last but not least, the last team I was with was the Shreveport Pirates. That was a team that was located in the States, but it was part of the Canadian Football League
Yeah,
expansion as well. So after that, I coached for about 18 years, became an athletic director, and after that, I started my own little company called Griffin Athletics. And I'm here in Greensboro, North Carolina, where that's still part of what I do, which is I work with different organizations, the AAU track and field, along with several other USA track and field. And now I bounce around and do things with training, as well as supplying organizations with track and field accessories and shoes. So that's what I've been doing, Kenn.
Yeah. So in other words, the man not only played the game, he's coached the game, he's been around the game pretty much, I think it's safe to say, for all of his life.
Yes.
And there is nobody else that I can think of who could provide us with some analysis during the course of the year, and who is a diehard G-man by all means, than my man Griff. So Griff, as we prepare for the game later on this evening against Texas A&M Commerce, what are some? That game is going to be televised on ESPN Plus. And
yes.
You who may not be aware, that is not ESPN. It does require a monthly subscription. I want to say somewhere in the ballpark of maybe $7-8. It may be a little bit more than that. I don't know, but we've got it. So you will be able to watch that game through streaming through ESPN Plus. And so we will also, by the way, for those of you who are interested, we will be doing a live show at the conclusion of the game. Probably, let's just say roughly be about 15 to 30 minutes after the conclusion. Go to the YouTube channel at the 1901 podcast, the YouTube channel, and we will provide live analysis, give you guys an opportunity to come in and chime in, and we'll even provide a link for those of you who want to come in and provide some insight, provide your input, and provide some opinion on what you think or how you think the game should have gone, depending on how it goes. But hopefully we will win this one. But Griff, what are your initial assessments in terms of what we should be looking for in this game against a team in Texas A&M Commerce? For those of you who may not be aware, is an FCS institution. Now, this is a team or a program that is currently, I believe, in its fourth year. going kind of in their probationary period. It currently or previously was a Division II team, and now is an FCS team, which is affiliated with the Southland Conference. And so there is a process in which, if you want to become an FCS member, or if you want to become an FCS member that is going to be eligible to win the national championship, you have to go through a 4-year probationary period. And so Texas A&M Commerce is currently in the 4th year. So as of next year, they will they're a member of the Southland Conference, but they will be eligible to win, if they qualify, uh, they will be eligible to win a Southland Conference championship, as well as be eligible for the FCS playoff in the event that that program is eligible. So this is a team that has progressed. Roughly, Commerce, Texas is located about an hour and a half northeast of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Many would actually consider it part of the Metroplex, but it is somewhat in a remote area. But it is very much a part of the Texas A&M system. So for those of you who may not be aware of what Texas A&M is, or Texas A&M Commerce, that's what this program is about. So Griff, for you and I talked about this earlier. Grambling played up in week 1. They, I guess to some degree, played down in a historic matchup against Tuskegee in week 2. And I don't know what everyone's general assessment might be, but of what we saw in those first 2 games, I didn't really think a whole lot of week 1, and I can't say I made too much out of week 2. But when you put in consideration that we did play a team that was, Division II caliber, is it safe to say that based upon what we saw last week, this team Grambling actually played down to the level of Tuskegee, in which left Coach Joseph in a situation to say that he wasn't pleased at all with their performance?
Well, from what I saw, is that they struggle somewhat with penalties, which it's always with Grambling when they do well, they keep their penalties low, and their output or the outcomes that they derive at is much better because they have a solid quarterback and they have somewhat of a good running game. I think they have 3 proficient backs that are capable of making chunk plays. The problem is when Grambling does not do well offensively, is because they've been very inconsistent with the penalties. And the penalties are almost like taking one step forward. You have a 10-yard gain, then you have a 5-yard penalty, then you have another 7-yard gain, then and that hurts Grambling because, well, I know what they're trying to do. And even the head coach, he indicated that they had a lot of things they needed to clean up. And I think if they want to be successful today, it's going to be based solely on, 1, their ability to run the ball, and 2, their ability to make plays consistently, which means that time of possession matters today, because you don't want your defense out there for 10, 15 minutes at a time. That always hurts your defense. But if Grambling can find a way to sustain drives, and they're able to take what I think they're very talented this year at the receiver position. Can we get consistent line play? Can we run the ball? Will determine how well we look on today's contest.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say, offensively speaking, obviously it all starts and begins with the play of Miles Crawley, who, as you well know, was named the Southwestern Athletic Conference preseason Offensive Player of the Year. And I think up to this point, especially in the game against Tuskegee, he did fairly well, even though the team overall, went into was it 37-3 or 37-6 at the end of the half,
10,
and then
10.
30, yeah, whatever it was, and
Yeah.
basically got shut out in the second half. So, and then of course Miles was pulled out. So, you can appreciate that. But let me ask you this: with respect to the fact that new coaching staff, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and so forth, um, the caliber of play that we've seen out of this Grambling team in the first 2 weeks. Is this kind of like what something to be expected? I mean, are we asking for too much too soon? I mean, we still have this week. It's a non-conference game, and then we have Jackson State. Now, even though that's a SWAC opponent, do know that that game will not have any impact. That is, it is a conference game, but it is a non-conference. I'm trying to. It's a conference. It's a conference school, but it's considered a non-conference game. It will have absolutely no bearing whatsoever in the SWAC standings towards the end of the year. Officially, SWAC play begins for Grambling against Prairie View in the State Fair Classic. So for those of you who, depending on how these first four games go, whether we be, uh, you know, 1-3, or well, won't be 0-4, but 1-3, just know that's worst case. I'm not trying to put that into the atmosphere by any means, but if for whatever reason after four games we are 1-3, do know that the sky is not falling, and that the run for a SWAC championship season begins with Prairie View in the State Fair Classic. So I say all that to say, depending on what or how this game goes, is it fair? We want to win, but I guess when you look at a first year, when you look at a coaching staff first year, are we right to have expectations to say we want to win and we want to win now?
Oh, sure. Because we're looking for three things. Every time all winning programs and all programs, you're looking for consistency, physicality, and execution. As long as you do those three things, you normally will get better as the season progresses. If you don't have those three elements, then you're kind of at a standstill and there's no room for growth. Consistent effort is everything in sports, whether it be football, basketball, or etc. I'm looking for Grambling just to show us some discipline, sustained execution, and to see that people are executing the scheme. Whatever the coaches have set forth and said, this is how we're going to attack the opponent offensively and defensively. Well, that's based now all the kids have to do is bring execution and discipline to the game plan. Now, if the game plan is off, then we got to look at the coaches. Why was the game plan this when it should have been this? But in terms of the kids, they just have to be disciplined, a sustained effort, and continue to play hard. That's really what I'm looking for, because like I know most this year, unlike last year, I thought Florida A&M was clearly the best team in the SWAC,
Mm-hmm.
and they wind up winning the Celebration Bowl and winning it all. But this year is different. I
Yeah.
I feel like Grambling is right there. They have 5 home games this year.
Mm-hmm.
If they do, and Grambling generally plays well at home. Even when we've struggled
Yeah.
in the last few years, okay, we've always done well at home. And so what I'm hoping to see, Ken, is that some growth from last week, and I'm hoping that we execute on both sides of the football. Win, lose, or draw, that is what we should be judging each one of these games on.
Oh, well said. Well said. So let's do this, because I do want to. We're not going to take a whole lot of time to focus on a game, because we'll spend quite a bit of time doing that um, later on afterwards. But I would like for individuals to not so much to get to know a little bit more about you, but I guess to just kind of put some things in perspective with how things have changed from the time you played versus to where we are now with NIL And with the transfer portal being what it is, before we started recording, you provided me a very interesting story about your first time playing in Grambling. And if, for those who, obviously they didn't hear it, tell that story if you don't mind. You talked about the first time you played in Shreveport as a freshman.
It's a game that Kenn is very familiar with, and most SWAC goers are familiar with. Grambling used to play, would always open up against Alcorn.
Yep.
It was called the Red River Classic. And as a freshman, I came in from a heralded, top-notch program. Viga High School out of Mobile, Alabama was one of the top programs, not just in the state, but in the nation. And what, as a freshman, I had a lot of guys were praising me as a freshman. I came in, I made plays in practice, and I did relatively well. But what you have to understand, practice speed and game speed are two different things. They put me in the first game, they called my number, Griffin, go in, middle linebacker. When I got out there, the speed of the game is between high school and college is phenomenally different. It's different. And I tell you, I was like a deer in headlights. First of all, I wasn't used to playing in front of 40,000 screaming fans. That was
Right.
that was disconcerting. And the second thing was that when you are playing against an opponent like an Alcorn, they are top notch. They had good players back then, very good athletes. And you don't. I mean, your reaction time has to grow by leaps and bounds. And what I realized is that I wasn't as ready as I thought I was. Okay, I was literally up there in shock because the game was going so fast. So a lot of times you have kids now who just leave programs because they want to play immediately, when really sometimes the best thing to do is to learn. You can learn so much by standing there watching others and watching game, how to prepare, how to be professional, both as a athlete and as someone who is a student of the game. That's how I came up in the game. And although I recognize that most athletes now, they have three things they are seeking. They're either seeking opportunity to play, which makes them hit the portal, or they're looking for a paycheck, which makes them look for a portal, or they fear challenges. I had to learn behind someone, but it inevitably benefited me because my next 3 years, I performed like a all conference player, and I did make all conference. So opportunity. If you take the time to understand, you have to get paid. You have to be patient. You have to. You can. I always say you can't be a good leader until you become a good follower. So, Ken, that benefited me greatly, and I hope that a lot of young players understand you can't have all this immediate success that you think until you're ready for it. Sometimes your coaches are trying to put you in a position to succeed and not just keep you from being you think you're all world, but you're not.
Griff, let me ask you this. How much of this, when you see how these players, I mean, I look at some of these games and they'll, name any two teams that are currently playing at, any given moment on a Saturday. And you'll see, a player makes a big play or something, and they kind of provide you with a quick bio on that player. And you'll see, man, there are players now in which they'll say he was played at such and such last year, the year before that. And there are literally players who have been playing, 4 or 5 years, and they've been to like 3 or 4 different schools. And I find that fascinating. And it makes me wonder, how much of this do you think I'm just assuming here. How much of this do you think is maybe something that's maybe, are the parents telling them, you know what, you need to go someplace else? I mean, or are these kids just unilaterally making a decision that I want to leave right now? I want to play. I know I'm better than that person who's playing ahead of me, and and then the parents are saying, you know what, yeah, let's go ahead and go. Are parents making this decision, or do you think that these are just decisions that these kids are making and that's it?
I think that there are three things that are driving these kids into the portal sometimes, and and I hate to mention Deion Sanders. Some of these players were other people's headaches. They didn't follow
Mm.
rules and regulations. They got
Ooh.
in trouble and they burned that bridge. So yes, they have to hit the portal. The second kid is some of these kids don't like adversity and they don't like being challenged. They
Ooh.
want to be given. Okay. If a kid comes in and he works harder than you and he's willing to be coached, because, I heard Nick Saban talk a lot about kids' body language.
Mhm.
Some of these kids' body language is horrendous. I mean, they keep in mind, Ken, some of these kids were coddled as athletes. I've been coddled, but here's the difference. If you don't put in the work, you don't have an opportunity. Hey, you're not going to have an opportunity to shine. And if someone behind you is working harder than you, and you're out here ducking and dodging, and you're out here half-assing in these reps, then guess what? They have no I mean, they're going to play.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. They're going to play. And it's going to affect your performance no matter where you go. You have to be prepared. And today, you know what? There's no reason for a kid not to be in top-notch shape, and with all the opportunities, all the online opportunities to learn the game and all the filming that's possible, you have a great opportunity to be at the top of your game every week. But it's all about, Ken, it's all about practice habits.
Yeah.
If you have poor practice habits, then you can be overtaken. I've always thought, for me, even at Grambling, at middle linebacker, okay, yes, I've come in with all this fanfare, but if someone outworks me, as long as I outwork the guy playing behind me, he will never be in front of me. And I
Mm.
took that attitude into every practice. Every day I showed up with my hard hat, willing to go. Now, the last piece of the transfer portal, sometimes kids are being told by parents,
Mhm.
by others, that, hey, man, you are great. You need to be here, or they're in pursuit of the almighty dollar. I understand it. And I don't disparage a kid for chasing the dollar, but let me tell you, again, once you get to that institution, you are going to have to show people why they are giving you this name and image money,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you're not going to be receiving that money for 3 years. They're just going to bring in another kid after you. That's part of the portal too. You can
Right.
go to a
And
new
Griff, to that
school.
point, and I think it's important for people to understand how this really all came about. I mean, obviously, this is the NIL situation has been something that's been going on for like a long time. But
Yes.
the thing that really ticked a lot of folks off, with respect to players, is that it's okay for a coach who has a great year at one school and then all of a sudden he takes off to go to another school, and yet the very reason a particular kid comes to school, to that school to play, was because of that coach. And so now that coach gets to leave and he gets like a multi-million-dollar raise, and yet this kid has got to stay now because he's made a contractual commitment to stay at that school for at least a year or whatever the process was at the time. And so now that player can't make any money and he can't leave because the coach that he wanted to play for is with someone else. And so now that we see the roles reversed, I just want to put some perspective on that for those that may not be aware, that's kind of where we are right now. So if those coaches can make money, the kids are saying, well, you know what, we can make money too. And so I just kind of wanted to put some perspective on that, because like you said, you don't necessarily begrudge a student athlete for wanting to make money, especially when you've got students who aren't necessarily athletes on the campus, and they've got side hustles, and they're entrepreneurs, and they've got whatever kind of business that they're doing making money. And yet you got these student athletes who've got commitments, and they've got practice, and they still have to perform in the classroom and so forth. They're doing all these things. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we don't begrudge those students. And I guess it's not so much for the money, but now it's gotten to the point to where, like you said, it's not only that I want the money, but I also want to know if I can play.
Focus on the performance, and the money will follow. That's literally in any profession or any sport. If you focus on the performance, those who perform consistently, consistency will come in the form of monetary gain. Okay, but if you focus on the money, what happens is you have a tendency to not worry about the performance. And believe me, every day there's a kid out there wanting to compete and wanting to excel at more than you, possibly. And let's be honest, if you two match up and you haven't done what you're supposed to as a student athlete, you're going to get replaced monetarily and performance wise as well. So that I would strongly suggest kids focus on the academic performance, because you can't, if you're not eligible, they can't help, you can't get on the field. And if you don't perform on the field, you won't be there. Look, there's a fine line between you and the next person. One thing that I was told when I was with the New Orleans Saints, the coach said, look around this room. This was Jim Mora. He said, look around this room. Everybody in this room is big, fast, and strong. He was right. I looked around. Everybody was big, fast, and strong. They don't bring you to NFL camp unless you all three. Period.
You know what, man? This is a conversation that we could go on for hours, and would still have plenty to talk about even after those hours would have passed by. But you know what, Griff, we're going to end it here. I wanted to give individuals an opportunity to know a little bit about you, to meet you, and to kind of give them something to look forward to as we continue to preview these games and review these games on the back end. Thomas Griffin, thank you so much, sir, for your time. For those of you who are watching, this is the inaugural episode of the 1901 podcast. As you see the ticker, take a moment, visit the website at the1901podcast.com. You have the opportunity to make a donation to support the growth of this operation. Some of you made it very clear. I do not want to pay you via PayPal. Is there any option to pay other than PayPal? Yes, you've got other options to pay other than PayPal. So you can go to the 1901podcast.com. You can make a donation. You can pay with credit card. And if you want, you can even Zelle a payment. And that is donate at the 1901podcast.com. So you can either pay by credit card or you can Zelle your payment. Either way will help us quite a bit. And there will be some additional things that we will do down the line. But hey, this is the inaugural historic first episode. Do join us later today at the conclusion of the Grambling versus Texas A&M game, and we'll do that live. But until that time, thank you guys so much for taking a moment to watch this podcast. Griff, we'll see you in a little bit. You guys, God bless you.